This is the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and we are once again behind the scenes working on some rolling stock. So today we have the Atlas beer can tank car. Now I don't know about you, but when you go out and you see all of the offerings in the hobby shop, they're all the same, right? You got your coal cars, your box cars, your flat cars, your tank cars, gondolas, etc. And everybody has them. I mean, we are, after all, modeling regular railroads, and to do regular railroads, you need regular rolling stock. So I always like to find things that are a little bit different. So I like to find the rolling stock that's something you may not see, something that's unique, and then I try to incorporate it into my layout. So the beer can tank cars are something that, quite frankly, I've never seen in person. I know that obviously they existed and exist, but I've never had one roll past me while I've been rail fanning. So when I found them in N scale, I went out and I purchased 4 of these cars. And that was a problem. And the problem was, now that I'm going to detail them, Gold Metal Products makes them in sets of 2. And of course, when I went to purchase this, there was 1 set left. So I am going to get 2 cars that get the upgrade and 2 cars that look, just the same. So let's take a look at the car itself. It is an Atlas car, so it has these are actually older cars. They have the old style coupler on them, and you'll notice that they are, the railings, although they're modeled here, are oversized. Same with the ladders, and you'll notice that there is no detail on the end of this car. There's no grab irons or anything that railings that would hold you on the end of the car. So not a legal rolling stock at this moment for our railroad. So the kit has more to scale pieces, and we're going to go ahead and upgrade these 2 cars. The reason I chose these 2 cars is because they are the 2 unique out of the 4 that I have. The other 2 are simply black with different reporting marks, but they don't have any logos on them. And of course, this one is green and black, which is an awesome color combination. So, we had to go with that. So we're going to start off with the green one, and we're going to get the parts out of here. Once again, I always have the same word of caution when working with these etched metal pieces, and that is make sure your hobby knife is sharp. Don't use any kind of cutters on them. You want to be very careful that when you are removing them from their sprue that you do not bend these pieces, because if you bend them in a place that you don't want, they are almost impossible to straighten back out to any sort of realistic. First thing we're going to do is take them out of the kit, and then we are going to spray them with a dull coat. That's just going to help our paint stick a little bit better when it comes time to paint these. So step 1, let's go ahead and get these things covered in dull coat. Okay, so for those of you who have not watched previous videos, you are looking at my tripod. Yes, it's actually just a can of tester spray paint, but we invest our money here in model parts and not in video equipment, so that is going to have to be our tripod. What you got to do next is, while your parts are drying, you got to get these old railings and catwalks pulled off, and it's not a major issue. They are attached only at the side. So if you can get underneath there either with your fingers and pry them off, or in my case, I had to get in there with a pair of needle nose pliers. I am very careful not to break these things, because if for some reason something would go wrong and I would need to put them back on, I do want them in one piece. And then if something doesn't go wrong, these might be used for platforms on something else. So don't ever throw your extra parts away. Keep them in the bin like most of us do, because they might just serve another purpose. In the meantime, we're going to let our dull coat pieces dry. Probably not going to spend a whole lot of time painting them, because of course the ladders are going to be simply black. The railings will probably be black with some sort of safety coloring. I haven't decided yet. I may look at prototypes, or I may do my own thing. But in the meantime, we've got to let the dull coat dry. Always use dull coat in a location where you have good ventilation, because it is pretty noxious, and it'll make you high as a freaking kite. So not good when you're trying to work with small pieces like these ones. You'll want to be clear, so make sure you've either got a fan running or you have it in a spray booth. So we'll be back right after those parts dry. Okay, so the next step, which I didn't bother to show you, but I'm sure you noticed these cars were fairly dusty. So I took some Woodland Scenics dust dabber, just cleaned off the top, and now we're ready to start putting this together. Well, almost. So here in the center we have the walking platforms, handrails, and the ladder that we're going to use instead of the one that's on there now. But here's the issue. Once I set that on top of the car, I'm not going to be able to weather the areas underneath the platform. Because a lot of times what will happen is, you know, when they're loading, you'll have a spill, and that spill, it's not going to get on the platform, which is open metal grating. It's going to roll down the side of the car, and it's actually going to be underneath the ladder, underneath the grating, and not necessarily on the ladder and grating itself. So we're actually going to weather this while we've got this ladder off. Now, there's a couple of different things that we can weather here, and it depends upon what is being carried in the car. So you can make a determination of that. For me, on the railroad here, I'm probably going to use this mainly for the printing company. And why I'm going to use it for the printing company is in my railroad, I have envisioned a world where the printing business is so damn good that they actually get their ink by rail car. That is a lot of ink. So obviously this is pre-internet, I guess. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is simply model, I'm going to call it chemical stains, right? So I don't want there to be what looks like paint running down the sides, because I don't think that would look realistic, and it's not necessarily a realistic load for a tank car. So I'm going to go ahead and just weather this up a little bit. All I'm going to do is use some very fine brushes, and when I say fine, I do mean fine. And I am going to add just a little bit of color, a little bit of weathering here, maybe a small amount of rust, just to give you the idea that this car's been on the road for a while. We're also going to fade the color up here a little tiny bit, just because, you know, the top of the tank car is going to get direct sunlight for most of the waking hours that this car is rolling around or sitting in the yard. So we're going to fade this up a little bit, and then we are going to weather just the underside here. Now, there's no major secret to how we're going to do that, so I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, in increasingly short time here, I have become a big fan of the Vallejo paints. And it's not that they are necessarily less expensive, or in fact they're more expensive, but they just seem to color so much better. The color is it's a good quality paint. So for this project, what we're doing right now is we've got black gray, we have dark brown, we have a flat brown, and we have a leather. So that is number 70.862, 984, 71.042, and 70.818 are the colors that we are using today. So if you haven't given Vallejo a try, you may want to give it a shot. As a little plug there, I have found their colors to be worthwhile, and you may as well. So what I'm using now is this black gray at the top, and I'm just putting a stripe right down the center of the car. And what I'm going to do then is sort of drag it off to the side a little bit and let it fade off into a blend. And all I'm trying to do here is simulate a faded color, so it doesn't take a lot of paint, and in fact I want it to be quite thin, because when these things tend to weather, they don't weather evenly, and so they should not weather evenly on our models as well. This does not require a ton of paint. In fact, I'm using a very small brush as it is. I am using a pointed brush instead of a flat brush, and the reason for that is because I am using the point more to drag the colors down and create sort of a, I don't want to say a spill effect, but that's kind of sort of what it's doing here. And that is just to keep, like I said, the weathering without a defined border, and to sort of give it a little bit of an edge, so that this car is not doesn't look uniform. A lot of times what I'll see happens is as folks are weathering their cars, they tend to get into a pattern. It's human nature that, you know, we like patterns. And so if you do too much of, say, weathering at a time, or you do too much scenery at a time, sooner or later you develop naturally a pattern to what you're doing. And there is very rarely patterns in nature. So we want to try to avoid that as much as we can. And we want the natural look, especially on this car. And we're just going to take the colors down over the side, because this is obviously the top, and the top side, I'm going to say, of the car is where you're going to have most of your weathering. And obviously the car being black makes it easy, because there is a black gray that's available. We're going to have a little bit of a different challenge when we come to the green here, because I don't have necessarily a green that matches that color that's faded, so we're going to use a little bit of a different technique on that. But all we're doing is taking the paint and dragging it down over the side here, so that we're getting the top of the car. Now, you can, of course, remove the trucks if that suits you, or you can leave them on there. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the color, the black gray, a little bit down here behind where the ladder is going to be, and that'll be about where we'll end with that. Okay, then with the weathering, just as we always do, we are going to take the dark colors first, and we are going to build up in layers, thin layers, obviously, thin layers. I can't stress that enough. We are going to build up the layers over top of what we have here with our faded top, and we are going to start with the dark browns, and then we're going to go towards the lighter browns and getting that sort of rush streak. Okay, so we are going to begin with our. It is a. I want to say it's like almost looks like an olive color. It's the dark brown of the mixes here, and I'm just going to take a little bit of it here, and I'm going to bring it down the side. And all I'm trying to do is simulate. Well, there was at one point in time something in this car, and that something may have either been under pressure, may have just spilled out because they overfilled it, but something happened, and now they've made a royal mess of things. So we're going to go ahead and make a mess of things just like they would have. And I'm also going to round the pressure relief valve here, maybe a little bit maybe a little bit spilled out the sides, I don't know. One thing that I'm constantly amazed of, and I've heard more than one person say it on YouTube, and that is, you know, it's my railroad, and I'll basically handle it the way I want to. And honestly, of all the things that I've heard on YouTube, that is probably one of the better recommendations. So just because it is your railroad and you can do what you want with it, and depending on what you're trying to achieve, that may be just the answer that you need. We're going to do a show here in short order, and it is about what is the draw for the hobby for everybody. And so how that spawned here was I watched one of my subscribers or one of the people that I subscribed to had done a thing that was a show on why people are in the hobby and why this is the greatest hobby. And for some reason, YouTube figured since I watched one person's opinion on it, they would give me everyone on YouTube's opinion on why this is the greatest hobby in the world. And there were a lot of different answers, and all of them were somewhat the same. So there are some commonalities that we all share as modelers, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to combine a couple of the things that I saw online with how I am approaching the hobby and share that with you. So basically, why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and what the end goal is for the for the railroad. So you know, there's a lot of different things to consider, and as far as, you know, what you might do in the hobby and what you might get into. And so I'm going to just impart to you some wisdom of what I'm doing, and maybe it aligns with what you're doing and makes sense. Or maybe you go, hey, he's totally crazy, I don't know why the hell I follow this guy. And that's okay too. But in any event, so that's the end result that we got here. It is basically looks like something is spilled out. Obviously, one of the techniques that you saw me apply here was that I did the colors while everything was wet. This let me get everything sort of together, mixed together on the car itself. So what I end up with is I have this faded color on the top. I have this rusty sort of spill color along the ports on the car, and when I bring this all together with some chalk pastels here at the end, that's going to look pretty decent. So for now, we're going to set this car aside and we're going to get our platform pieces ready. Okay, so we've got our cars sitting off to the side. They're going to dry, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take our etched metal pieces here and we are going to bend them into their final position. So the handrails need to come up and the ladder will need to go down, and they do make a specialized metal brake for this. But if you have a pair of needle nose pliers or tweezers, something that is flat with no teeth inside that'll give you a crisp 90-degree bend, you can use that just the same. I would have to say that depending on how much of this stuff you're going to be doing at once, the brake may be more useful to you. But basically, the pieces will bend nicely, and you just need to sort of tweeze them just a little bit, and then they will take shape. Now, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to bend this to the car's curvature just yet, basically because I want to mount it to the car itself and then see what that looks like. And once it looks, you know, like it's curved the right way, then I can finish it. But I want to use the body of the car itself to make the curve so I don't end up with something funky. So I'm going to go ahead and bend all four of these into position, and then when we come back, hopefully our car is dry enough and we can go on to that step. Okay, so I made a discovery, and it wasn't much of a discovery. It was clear in the directions, but I know for the ladies watching, if there are any, this is going to come as a major surprise to you, but I did not read the instructions. It's not that I can't read the instructions, it's just that as a man, I am prevented from reading the instructions by simple decree, and that is that we all understand as when we're born that men, we are not allowed to read the instructions for anything, unless we want to lose a man card. So in any event, I'll take the hit on this one, and I will read the instructions. And what I realized was when I removed the ladder, I had some holes in the side of my car, which is not good for most cars, especially not good for a tank car. So there actually is instructions on how to fill said holes, and it's silly. And what it is you take the ladder and you remove the top supports that were in here, and then you glue them in the hole. And I thought, well, that's really stupid. I don't want to do that. There's got to be a better way. And then after thinking about it, here I am cutting off the supports and gluing them into the side of the tank car. So the process was simple. I just put a very small amount of plastic cement in each of the holes, and then using a very small needle plier, which the peg is actually, if you cut it right, cut to the same curvature of the car. And if you line it up correctly and you use the tweezers to just sort of push it into the hole, it actually just makes that hole sort of disappear. So that's probably the reason why they had you do it. It is probably the easiest way to do it. And the other thing, and if you just watch me launch it off the camera there, so don't do what I just did. But the other thing is this plastic. This plastic is solid all the way through. So in the case of me launching that somewhere over the model table over there, I can cut this other one off, and I will be able to shape it to the correct size and shape here at the end. And I probably won't have to paint it because, once again, it's going to be black because the plastic is black all the way through. So as you just shove that, no laughing in the back, but as you shove it in the hole here, you'll notice it's a pretty nice fit. And once you get it lined up with the edge of the car, just stop. Don't push it any deeper. You don't want to push it all the way through or something. And then once that dries, you can sort of sand that out and either continue your weathering over it, repaint it, whatever you're going to do. But obviously do that before you put the metal railing on. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure how you're going to fix it. You could do it with putty. The problem with putty is then you've got to go back, you've got to sand it, you got to paint it. You know, this is sort of a catch-all. So, all right, let's go ahead and get the platform on here. Okay, so if you're like me, you have a boatload of brushes that you've hung on to, and they are entirely past their prime. But they work just perfect for instances like this where you need to paint on some Gorilla Glue and you do not want to ruin a good brush or waste a micro brush or something like that. So this brush's last bit of service here is going to be in the name of putting these platforms on this cart. So what we're going to do is just put a small amount of glue right where the platform sits, and that you can tell where the platform sits because there are these little flat pieces, and that is what holds the platform in place. So we're just going to put a small amount of Gorilla Glue on the top of that using this very worn out brush, and we are going to set our platform right on it, and we're going to let that dry. The platform will just sit nicely on the on those stanchions, I guess they are. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have lined it up so that it is flat, because if it's not flat, then it's going to look wrong, and also it'll mess up how you curve the ladder to the right place around the tank. So once you are satisfied that your platform is set and it is level, you can go ahead and let it dry, and we will move on to do the second car. Don't worry if your railings are a little bent and they need to be pushed into place better. That's fine. We'll do that afterwards. Just so long as the platforms themselves are flat on the car. Everything else we can take care of in a minute. So we'll go ahead and do both of these cars, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so once your railing's dry, it looks something like that. Now you got your ladders, your platforms, your railings. Okay, that's all good. We'll have to touch up the black a little bit on the railings. It flaked off. We were working on it. Not a big deal. The next step is there are actually cross pieces that go from this rail to this rail. They run across the car, and they are fairly small pieces. So on the set, they are number 5 here. Now, they are not to the correct size. You're going to have to cut them. So, I mean, that's just a matter of taking your hobby knife, cutting these pieces free, and then a little bit of super glue on either side, hold it in place. So I think everybody realizes at this point that, you know, I'm a big fan of not bending these metal pieces before they're supposed to be bent. So I am very careful to cut them as close to the end of the sprue as possible, and then I use my finger to hold them in place right at the edge, and that stops the downward pressure of the knife from bending them out of position. Now, these pieces are really tiny, so we are going to use the micro gluing technique that you saw on, a version of it anyway, that you saw on the video for building the fire truck. And all I'm going to do is take a very small amount of glue on the edge of this thing and allow it to wick into place. Now, the pieces are made long. It even says that in the instructions. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to purposely set it on the edge with one side just a little bit longer, and once the glue dries and everything is set up, I will come back and make sure that I cut that to the proper length. So that's going to be my approach to this. If you use a fast setting glue, which I highly recommend and I'm not using, so this is a do as I say, not as I do moment. Just make sure you touch it in the right spot and get it set there so that you don't have it moving around on you. I'm just going to use the knife here just to knock it into place because it is not cooperating for some reason. And then we're going to take our second piece and do the same on the other end. So once we get this to the correct location, the correct length, we'll go ahead and cut those pieces off using a pair of wire cutters, and that'll be the end of that step. Okay, so now that we have our upper platform built, our railings trimmed, now they do need painted. They're obviously shiny now. They got some glue on them, and some of the paint came off. We are prepared to do the next step. Now, the next step is one of those gut-wrenching moments where you have to actually do physical damage to your model, and once you do that damage, you're pretty much committed. So we're going to take our trusty little wire cutters, our nippers here, and we are going to remove the molded in plastic walkway. Although it has details where it's molded in place as a walkway, obviously it's not see-through, and we have much better platforms. So we are going to just simply cut that free and on both sides, and it falls away. So now you're left with something that looks a little bit like that. Then our next step is going to be we need to remove our foot rungs here. They are molded in place as well, so we're just going to cut them off at the bottom, and then we're going to come back in here and we're going to trim this piece even with the plastic as well. Now, that is not going to be where you're going to stop with that particular process. You are going to have to come back in here with a knife and just sort of clean this edge up. Be careful when you're doing this, one, that you don't cut yourself, because you are going to have to hold it fairly close to the piece that you're working on, and two, that you don't do any more damage than you need to, because all you're trying to do is make this flat. You're going to repeat this process here on the other side. All you're going to do is remove the foot rung and then the places where it was attached to make that nice and smooth. Okay, now we come to the tricky part. So when you removed that center walkway piece, you did leave a small amount of it where it attaches to the car. I don't know if you can see that here on the edge, and that's got to come off. So it's glued on there pretty good. I used the nippers in this direction, perpendicular to the car, to kind of squish it off, and that gets the bulk of it out of there. But then you do need to go back with the knife and you need to trim this up, and be very careful. Once again, you don't want to damage this piece too unrecognizably, because once again it is going to be the support. So you just want to get it trimmed up a little bit here. There's also some molded details, some air brake details, and some other details that are still molded in place that do not have replacement parts. So you don't want to damage those as well. So be very careful as you remove this. And once you get that removed, come back in here, clean up this edge, make sure it's nice and square. You can paint this at this point if you would like. I'm not going to, because what's going to end up happening is when I come in here and install the grating, I'm going to end up painting the grating again, just because enough of the paint's flaked off during the process that it's going to need repainted. Okay, so the pieces that you are looking for are right here. They are flat, of course, and we will need to bend them. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to cut them free of the sprue in which they are put on. And always keep your fingers close to the place at which you're cutting so that you do not get a weird deformation in the metal itself. Once those pieces are free, make sure you cut all the way through. Okay. The next step is going to be to bend them into place. Once again, we're taking our no-toothed needle nose pliers. They're very smooth on the inside. We don't want to damage the metal in any way. We're just going to take it where the rung starts, bend it at a 90-degree angle using the pliers as the brake. We're going to do that here on both sides. And once you do that, you are going to end up with a piece that looks just like that. And it's kind of hard to see because it's almost transparent, but it's bent at a 90-degree angle. And you're going to have two of those per car, obviously one per side. So we're going to take that and we're just going to bend it into place again. Does not require a lot of pressure. Obviously, it's thin metal. Just make sure your angles are nice and crisp. Otherwise, it'll look funky on the car. And then you'll have to come back and fix it. Okay. Once you have that bent into place, you're going to bring your Gorilla Glue in. And you're going to apply just a small amount of Gorilla Glue on the edge here. If you have excess, clean it up with a paper towel. Not a big deal. Does not take a lot for it to stick, and then you're going to take your piece. Now there is a piece that has a hole cut out in it. It's very, very hard to see, but the hole is right here. It's probably not showing up on my black shirt as the background, but let's see if we can get it to look like this. There you can see the hole a little bit better there. Okay, that lines up with the brake wheel. That's the only requirement for this piece, and only on one side. And then we're just going to set that in place and leave it to dry. So you'll end up with a piece that looks just like that. That's going to be your new crossing platform there. There is a railing. We'll add that separately. And we'll repeat the process here on both sides. Already I can tell you that this is a much nicer detail than the molded on Atlas pieces. That's not necessarily a knock on Atlas. These are older models, and to be fair, they are relatively inexpensive. So this is an upgrade that you would expect on a higher priced car. So let's not lose sight of what we're doing here. We're taking a car that was not a high priced vehicle, and we are making it a high priced vehicle. So once again, make sure your platform is level. If you accidentally remove too much and you need to shim it, make sure you've got styrene around to shim it. But you should get a nice level platform. If you don't, it's going to look funky. So just make sure that it is level. Set that to dry, and then we'll be back with the railing next. Okay, so if you followed along this far, you should have a car that looks just about like so. You've got your walkways on. You've got your upper walkways and ladders on. And our next step is we are going to add the railings to the back platform. They are situated on the bottom of your sprues. And it's a little difficult to see here. Let's see if I can make it a little more visible. There you go, right there, that U-shaped piece right there. And then the other thing you're going to do is, because these are going to get in the way, you're going to want to put your brake wheels on. The brake wheels are right in the center. They are the only wheel on the kit. So we're going to do that first. To put that on, you've got to remove first the plastic brake wheel that's on here. You can try to remove it in one piece. I don't think it's going to work because they are glued on. And I found that they either get deformed or they bend, they break. So I don't really worry too much about it. Once again, you're putting on a metal piece. So I just sort of pry it off with a modeling knife until the glue lets go. Not going to worry about painting it because we're going to have to come back and touch up all the paint anyway. One thing that I did do at this stage is, because these parts are very small and because we want them to set fairly quick, I did switch my glues. Still a Gorilla Glue, but I moved to a super glue. It is the gel. The reason I did that is it sets up very, very fast. And what I mean by that is, when you take the piece and your tweezers, which you are going to need because these pieces are damn near impossible to hold, you apply a small amount of glue to them, and then using your tweezers, you're going to set them onto the stub left behind when you remove the brake wheel. And you need it to stay in place like that. So you do need to use a super glue just because it needs to dry fast and instant. You're going to want the same thing for your railings because you don't want them sort of hanging out there, and you don't have to try to brace them and tape them into place. They're just too damn small, and it's just not going to work. So once again, I have my glue on a small piece of plastic off to the side, and I'm just using my tweezers to hold the piece while I put the glue on the ends. I'm not going to be too shy about the glue, but once again, you don't have a whole lot of surface to glue, so it's not gonna hold a lot of glue. Setting it back as far as you can into the existing grating that you've put on in the last step, and with that glue, if you put enough of it on, the railing will stay in place, and it will look a little something like this. So that is the look that you were going for. Here's a car. I've already got it done on the green one. So you do have the safety rails on either side. And that is something that the Atlas kit originally does not have. It doesn't have the see-through grating. It's a molded in plastic that looks kind of like that. It's pretty cheesy looking. Serves the purpose for the price point of the car, but that looks a whole lot better. Then, of course, you have the railings now, which you did not have in the earlier version. Now, here's a couple of things that I'm not going to necessarily show you me putting on because, once again, they're a little bit redundant, but they are these placards. So I'm going to go ahead and mount these on either side of the platform. They are really tiny. You probably could find or make warning labels for them depending on what your material is. Once again, here it might be a little easier to see if I give you a solid backing there. So there's little triangles. Sorry, those little, I guess, are diamonds. Those are the placards. They do show you in the directions where they go on the platform. I am going to put them on, but once again, it's sort of repetitive, so I'm not going to necessarily show that step. Then the last thing that I did want to show you, and it's kind of a cool thing. So you notice those little tiny lines right here in the middle? Yeah, these little guys right here. Okay, those get mounted to the side of the car. What you will notice on the side of your tank cars, there is a rail, and that rail runs right along the bottom side of here. It's a personnel guard, basically, to keep people safe from under the tank car here. They don't give you the wire to do that. I'm actually gonna have to go back into my kit and see if I've got any pieces small enough to fit that place. If I do, I'm going to do that. If not, I'm going to hold off just because I don't want to break off the stanchions and not have the wire in place. So let's go take a look and see what I got. Okay, so we spoke just a little bit ago here about the standoffs that you have for the sides of the car. And I don't know if you can see these because they're awfully tiny. But right here, and here, 3 per side, I do have the standoffs. Now, the important thing is they've got to go underneath the ladder, so you don't want them sticking out past the ladder because you want your standoff railings to be underneath. And I went looking for some wire, and the piano wire was too thick, actually. So what I ended up finding was a very small piece of styrene. And to my surprise and happiness, it fits perfectly through the eyelets of each of the standoffs. So although it's not wire and it's pretty flexible, that's actually going to play in our favor, I think, as we sort of weave this thing through the car. And when we're done, we should have something that looks like that. Okay, so we'll cut it to size, and then we're going to paint it black, and then we're going to have our little handrails. Okay, so the big secret is the plastic, which is a simple plastruct piece. It is nothing crazy. I don't know if you can see the number there, but it is part number 90850. It is a 0.010 inch, and it's just a piece of round styrene. So that is the absolute perfect size for those railings. So if you're looking for something to make the railings out of, I'm going to highly recommend that. Then, of course, once we get it, in the car and where we want it, we can go ahead and we're just going to cut that free. And that should be us. I'm just using the sprue cutters here because they'll cut right through there and there won't be any issue. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this into position where I want it, and then using a small amount of glue on a brush, I'm just going to go ahead and glue that into place. Going to do that to all four sides of the cars, and then we are ready to touch up paint and get this thing out on the road. So give me a couple seconds to do that, and then we'll be right back, and I'll show you what the end result is. So I thought the best way to show you the progress and what was done is to show you the original. So this is what the car looks like when you first get it. Out of the box, you've got a plastic molded on platform, no handrails. Up here, you've got these real thick sort of, they're just plastic handrails, and you don't have the cross member. You don't have the rails along the side here to stop you from going under the car. And then you've got this unrealistically thick ladder on the side. So if this car is in a fleet and it's just rolling around, and it's on a train that doesn't stop anywhere, then that's probably fine. I mean, that's a good starting point, right? I mean, it's nice that the plastic wheels have some color to them and whatnot. So I mean, it's not a bad car from Atlas if you're looking for these and you just want to leave them alone. I mean, it's okay. Unless you're looking for the detail, then you're not really going to notice it till you see it next to one of these guys. So what do we have here? We've got prototypical sized railings and ladders. You have the guards on here. You have the etched metal walkways and grab rungs. You have the placards. Now you could put a little bit of red on there if you wanted to, but those warning signs are always white with red and black printing. It's too small. We've got a more scale size brake wheel. And of course, you can go in and do your weathering as well. But so that's what the two cars look like in comparison. So it's a nice upgrade kit. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time, and the pieces are very small and very fine. The differences are subtle, and if you're just trying to fill a unit train or something, then maybe it's not worth all that effort for you. But if you want a piece that's going to sit somewhere and is going to collect attention, then maybe it's worthwhile to do the extra work and get the kit looking good. Obviously, that kit makes two, so we did do the green one as well. Same deal. They got some extra weathering powder on there, but they need cleaned up a little bit. But that's basically the deal. So good kit. Once again, fun build. The parts are very tiny, so this is not going to be something that I'm going to be picking up and moving anywhere. It's not going to be going to any train shows or anything like that. It's got too many parts and pieces on it, so it's going to stay on the layout and get handled as little as possible. Hope this was somewhat useful for you. If you're planning on upgrading your kits, I do recommend it. It's definitely a fun little exercise, a little bit of a challenge. And now the challenge is going to be to keep all those fine detailed parts on the car and not on the ground.